Just wanted to make sure I was in the right spot.
Yes, ma'am. I don't see everybody on the full screen, although that's what I've told them that I want. So I'm having to look a little bit closer. It's 5 o'clock. I'd like to know if we've done a sound check so that we know that everybody's speakers work.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you. So it looks like I'm assuming that Board Member Marshall is here, or maybe not. Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
I cannot see. Okay, thank you. And in order to see what I'm looking at now, which is the full board and the superintendent, I had to go to the link that says speakers as opposed to going to the one that says full screen. So that's a little bit different than what I've had to do in the past, but I can see most of the speakers by clicking on that as opposed to the full screen. It's only giving me one board member instead of the whole group, but it's working. So I just wanted to let you know that. Thank you for making everything work. So having said all of that, it is 5 o'clock and we are scheduled to get started at 5 o'clock. So I would like to do that. It's actually 5:01. So if, with no further ado, unless anybody has a reason to not start at this time, you can raise your hand. Otherwise, I'd like to go on and get started so we can do our work and come back and do more work. It appears that everybody is okay with starting now. I don't see anyone that says don't start now. So thank you very much. At this time, there's a motion to open our meeting this evening. The first thing that the board will do into the executive session. So Board Member McIntosh, seconded by Dr. Shore. And if everyone that's in favor would raise your hand so I can see, please. And Board Member Marshall, if you could stick your hand over closer to Board Member Craig, just for the sake of me seeing you cast your vote, if that's possible.
We might switch chairs too.
Okay, I see everybody's hand right now, except as soon as I get to see Board Member Marshall's, we will move forward. Thank you, Board Member Marshall. Appreciate you. Thanks for being so flexible. So at this time, we have a motion and a second, and everyone has voted yes to moving into the executive session. So we will leave this screen and go into our executive session at this time, please. Thank you.
Therefore, just for the record, to clarify the exception, it's there 61-8-10-1.
I could not hear whatever was said the last time. It sounds like the person's in the tunnel.
Councilor Brown just clarified the statute that allowed us to go into executive session.
Oh, did I say the wrong thing?
Just the last two numbers, I think, were different.
Okay,
So
I apologize.
it's correct now.
Okay, so if we could leave and go into executive session, please. Thank you very much.
No, this something.
Somebody's being a smarty pants. Checking 1, 2, 3. Check.
You or Scott say something.
Don't forget about me.
What does he say? Keep going. Okay. Going and going and hey, Jason, how is it going? Are you having a good day? Yes. Oh, wow. Testing 1, 2, 1, 2. Let's have a wonderful evening. Everybody's happy. It's a wonderful day in the neighborhood. Is that good, Jason?
But honestly, what I want to do is go downstairs and fill a whole bunch of USB-C chargers.
Yes.
Run off them and just put them all in here. So it doesn't matter what you put here.
He's getting a weird delay.
Who is?
Jason.
I don't know what that would be.
Hello. We're plugged into the Crestron like we normally are. Whoop. Do you have the page up that says we're in executive session? Jason? Do you have the sign up that says we're in executive session? Okay. And apparently I'm going to bring up the Pledge of Allegiance too. Yeah. Okay, testing 1, 2, 1, 2. Does it sound any better? Huh. Wonderful day in the neighborhood, a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Wouldn't you like to be my neighbor? I wonder if it's the audio port again. Do we want to switch and put the deal? No, he's late. Oh. Testing 1, 2, 1, 2. Testing. Testing 1, 2, 1, 2.
The $90 for inconvenience.
This is the interpreter. Can I get a sound check just to make sure we can hear?
This is Dr. Marshall, microphone check.
Thank you.
This is Chuck Truesdell, microphone check.
This is Jennifer Brislin.
Everyone sounds great. Thank you.
We do have everyone ready. Ms. Porter, whenever you are.
Talking to myself. Thank you. I was just getting ready to get everybody back and ready to start. So thank you everyone for your time this evening. At this time, I would like to speak to what we just finished doing. The Board of Education just met an executive session to discuss proposed litigation pursuant to the KRS statute of the Open Meetings Act, and no action was taken while in the closed session. At this time, I will ask if there is a motion related to the proposed litigation. And at this time, I would like to call on Board Member James Craig, please.
I do have a motion, Ms. Porter. I move that the board authorize general counsel to engage outside counsel to proceed with initiating litigation and the filing of a complaint consistent with the matter of proposed litigation discussed in closed session. The identity of the matter cannot be disclosed at this time in order to preserve litigation strategy, but will become public at the time of filing with the court.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second to the motion, please? Board Member McIntosh is the second to the motion. At this time, I will take a vote very, very quickly by saying, all those in favor, would you please raise your hand to the motion? All those that are in favor. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. So is there a motion to adjourn from the previous session so we can start our business meeting? Is there a motion to adjourn, please? Board Member Craig, and it appears from what I can see on the screen, so a second is coming by Board Member McIntosh. All those in favor, please raise your hand. It's unanimous. We are now closed from this session and we will start with our business meeting for the evening. I would like to welcome everyone to the April 12th business meeting of the Jefferson County Board of Education. As we always do, there will be a moment of silence, so please join us for a traditional moment of silence. Thank you. If we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and whoever is in the Stewart Auditorium that's close to a microphone, would you please speak loudly so everyone can hear?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Our next item on the agenda is Board Member McIntosh will read the district's vision statement. Board Member McIntosh.
Thank you. All Jefferson County Public School students graduate prepared, empowered, and inspired to reach their full potential and contribute as thoughtful, responsible citizens of our diverse, shared world.
Thank you very much. Next, we will move on to our recognitions and resolutions, and I am to introduce Jennifer Breslin and Dr. Polio. If you have something you want to say before or after the resolutions, please feel free to do so. But I've been asked to recognize Jennifer, so if you want to speak first or after, please do so.
We'll send it right to Jennifer.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me, and good evening, everyone. Tonight, we are honored to recognize the spectacular accomplishments of our students, staff, and schools. We begin with the recognition of this year's recipients of the Minor Daniels Scholarship Fund, which seeks to make college more accessible for students who might not otherwise have a path to earning a degree. The scholarship honors Minor Daniels, a former JCPS teacher and administrator, and the namesake of Minor Daniels Academy, an alternative school in JCPS for 6th through 12th graders. The award, however, was open to students from across the district. The scholarships, which this year totaled $29,000, come from the employee-funded JCPS Gives campaign and ranged from $1,000 to $3,000 each. Preference was given to students of color, students majoring in medical or education fields, students on free and reduced lunch, and first-generation college students. Students earning the 2022 scholarships include Caitlin Bowman, Louisville Male High School, Mariah Brown, Central High School, Rodriana Burns, Central High School, Josie Bunzy, Pleasure Ridge Park High School, Jay Cameron, Central High School, Terrence Carter, Atherton High School, Tashaw Carey, Valley High School, Mayana Franklin, Central High School, Jolene Gemma, Doss High School, Jace Lackford, Butler Traditional High School, Lanesha Mason, DuPont Manual High School, Kimberly O'Neill, Central High School, Makobe Perry, Central High School, Elijah Tarver, Ballard High School, and Kennedy Zachariah, Central High School. Please join me in congratulating these students on their incredible achievement. I'd also like to invite any principals and board members up who'd like to have their photo taken with the students. Pretty good. All right. Next, we'd like to recognize Adi Gulamudi, a junior at DuPont Manual High School, who recently developed and launched free online computer science lessons for adults. The goal for this initiative, which he calls Path to Programming, is to help people, particularly those in Eastern and Western Kentucky who've been impacted by the decline in the coal industry, learn to code, develop websites, and master other computer skills so they can start new and lucrative careers. The initiative is more than just a pet project for Audie. He's invested hundreds of hours getting his program up and running, bought Facebook ads to promote the free curriculum, networked with nonprofit organizations throughout the region to connect with individuals who could benefit from the courses. And he's reached out to businesses that may need these new employees in the computer science field. And he's doing all this for free. He said he wants to share his knowledge with people who could benefit from his insight. I really want to bring free resources to people who don't have as much as I do, he said. Please join me in congratulating Adi Gulamudi for his ingenuity and selflessness in creating Path to Programming. Excuse me. I'd also like to invite his principal and any board members who'd like to have their photo taken. Thank you. And finally, We'd like to recognize the many JCPS students who displayed courage, strength, and poise in participating in the civic and democratic process during the 2022 Kentucky legislative session. Fisher Wells, a 7th grader at Westport Middle School, testified earlier this year before a Kentucky Senate committee in opposition to Senate Bill 83, which would ban transgender girls from participating in girls' sports. Fisher, who appeared before the committee with her parents by her side, said she wanted to be able to play hockey with her friends next year. Sports, she said, are important to her mental health and a great way for her to cope with things. Please join me in congratulating Fisher for her courage, strength, and poise in participating in the civic and democratic process. We'd like to invite Fisher's principal and any board members up as well. Thank you. Next is Cameron Julian, a student at DuPont Manual High School. Cameron testified earlier this year before a legislative committee in Frankfurt, requesting that boards of education be allowed to make provisions in their excused absence policies for mental health as well as for physical health. Please join me in congratulating Cameron for her courage, strength, and poise in participating in the civic and democratic process. And once again, we'd like to invite her principal and any board members forward for a photo. All right, thank you. Kashawn Johnson, a student at Central High School. D'Angela McMillan, a student at Grayson James Academy of Excellence. And Jeriah McMillan, a student at W.E.B. Du Bois Academy, testified earlier this year before a legislative committee in Frankfurt concerning the Crown Act, creating a respectful world for natural hair, which would prevent discrimination based on hairstyles. In addition, other students who are part of the Young Prodigy supported the work on the Crown Act, including Aaliyah Compton from Johnson Middle, Dream Flowers from Iroquois High School, Heavenly Garth and Amani Garth from the Academy at Shawnee, Amaya Hudson from Conway Middle, Kaylin Booker from Western Middle, and Devon Pitney from DuPont Manual. I want to mention that the entire group has been invited to attend a program at Harvard University due to their advocacy. Please join me in congratulating these students for their courage, strength, and poise in participating in the civic and democratic process. And of course, I'd like to invite their principals and any board members forward for a photo. All right. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. All right. And finally, Brianna Woods, Genesis Hatchett, Love Eden, Alicia Thorne, and Brennan Eberwine, students at DuPont Manual High School, Orrin Hatchett, Joseph Page, Dual Hatchett, DeMontez Shepard, Dennis Collins, and D'Artagnan Hill, students at WEB Du Bois Academy, and J.S. Rashid, a student at Barrett Traditional Middle School, all testified earlier this year before a legislative committee or otherwise supported their team in Frankfort concerning the importance of curriculum reflecting students' lived experiences. These students are all members of the Edutainers of Justice League Louisville. Please join me in congratulating these students for their courage, strength, and poise in participating in the civic and democratic process. And one last time, if any principal or board member would like to have their photo taken, please come up. Thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, that concludes tonight's recognitions.
Thank you so much. Round of applause for everybody before I ask for the motion to accept. Thank you everyone for being there, and especially to our youth for the work that they have done. Their voices matter. Do not be discouraged if people don't listen hard enough. Your voices matter. So please keep talking to us and for education. Dr. Polio, do you have anything to say before I call for the motion to receive the recognitions?
We could hold just a second, Ms. Porter. I think we're getting a lot of people walking out. You probably can't hear them.
No, sir, I can't. So tell me when to go.
Just, you know, the how loud it can be when everyone's leaving. So we'll give it just a second. Thank you, Ms. Porter. I'll just say congratulations to all of our students and our families and our principals that were here with our students. You know, in a very long and difficult legislative session, I think our students were the stars. So very proud of each and every one of them. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Polio. Thank you, students, parents, staff, and to our Board of Education. So at this time, is there a motion to receive the recognitions, please? Is there a motion to receive the recognitions? The motion is made by Ms. Duncan and seconded by Board Member Craig. All those in favor, if you would please raise your hand. It passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Next, we will move on to the meeting agenda. Is there a motion at this time to approve the meeting agenda for tonight? Is there a motion to approve? Board Member Craig, seconded by Board Member Marshall. All those in favor, please raise your hand. It's unanimous. Thank you very much. The recommendation for the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the previous meeting? Is there a motion? Board Member Craig, seconded by Board Member McIntosh. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. It passes unanimously. Thank you very much. At this time, it is my honor and pleasure to introduce our superintendent for the superintendent's report this evening, Dr. Marty Polio. Dr. Polio.
Thank you, Chair Porter. Thank you, board members. I bring you the superintendent report for April 12th. And I'll say this, it does feel a little more normal now to start my superintendent report with the room being full 5 minutes ago and now completely empty. So reminds me of the good old days. So a little bit of normalcy here. Tonight, I am going to do something a little bit different with my superintendent report. As I've talked about a lot over the last few months about chronic absenteeism and how it is negatively impacting outcomes for our students, I wanted to bring some of this information and data publicly and to the board so that we know the challenge that we face and we are very clear about that challenge. And I will say some of this data is very difficult to see, but is a real issue and a real problem that if we expect to see improvements and outcomes for our students, we have to tackle this. And so I know it is not the most complex of issues. It is a complex issue, I should not say that. Absenteeism, and we can say there are many factors that contribute to chronic absenteeism. But getting kids in seats in our schools is imperative if we expect to improve student outcomes and decrease or eliminate that achievement gap. And so I just wanted to highlight some of these so that we see the real numbers in this district right now. I'll say this up front. I believe the data I'm going to give you today correlates with the student assignment presentation and the student choice presentation. So it's not, this is not isolated from that. I will say this, when we talk about student assignment changes and choice though, this is not the only factor that goes into student absenteeism. There are a multitude of factors that impact this. Some are controlled by us. Many are outside of our walls that we can't control, that we have to look to others to support, such as affordable housing, mental health support from outside agencies, physical health, as you will see, is a huge part of this. So there are many factors, but one of them, I'm convinced, is our current student assignment plan. So I would like to walk you through some of the data. First of all, let's talk about what is chronic absenteeism. And we say JCPS Pupil Personnel Manual, it also along with state regulations, any student who has missed 10% of the school year is considered chronically absent, whether excused or unexcused. The bottom line is they have not been in school for 10% of those school days. So in a typical school year, when we have 175 school days, chronically absent would mean 17.5 days of school a year. And so I don't have that exact number, what it is right now, 140, 10% at this point to be chronic absent would be 14 school days. So I just want to say this. I also want us to say, we have to level set here. When we have students who miss 10% of the school days, it is going to be an extreme challenge to get them to the level that we want them to be. And unfortunately, many of our students are year after year with this many days. And so we have to understand the impact that chronic absenteeism is having. So as we look at a group, this is by student group. I just wanted to make sure that we know this. All JCPS students, 30% of our students are chronically absent, missing 10% or more. That is an enormous number, but it is 30% right now. You can see free and reduced lunch is 36.5%, almost 37%. Special education is closing in on 40% are chronically absent. This impacts student outcomes. With race and ethnicity, you can see we have a gap. 36.1% of our Black students are chronically absent. 32.7% Hispanic Latino are chronically absent. 25.3% white students are chronically absent. So it is across all races and ethnicities, but you can see we have a distinct difference there, and there is a gap. I did want to bring this out because Dina's department did do this in conjunction with medical outcomes as well, because I think it's important as we look to increasing student attendance, aligned also with health conditions of our students. So as you can see, students have none of these health conditions, 28.7, one or more, 36.5, students with asthma, 40.6, students with diabetes closing in on 50% of the students, chronically absent students with seizures, 41.8%. So you can see student physical health is a major factor when it comes to attendance. And I do have to pause on this one because I think this is extremely important for us to look at right now, because I wanted to make sure we looked at students that are chronically absent. This is not schools, this is student inside of our choice zone. and then outside of our choice zone, and then the total. And I think this impacts significantly the students that, and once again, 86% of our students of color are taking their assigned school. So these are the students who leave their community inside the choice zone often, and it's not their choice. So at the elementary level, inside choice zone, 39% are chronically absent. 19% outside the choice zone are chronically absent. And these stats are for this current year. Middle school, 52% of our students inside the choice zone are chronically absent. 52%. 29% outside of the choice zone. And this is the most alarming of them all. In our choice zone, high school students, 58%, nearly 6 out of 10 are chronically absent. This doesn't even talk about those students that might have 17, 16, 15 absences. This is 17 and a half or more, 58%, 37% outside of the choice zone. And then you can see the totals. I think this, if there is nothing that says a bigger alarm to us, then we must change what we are doing. This has to be it right now. We cannot change student outcomes when we have data like this sitting in front of us, and getting kids into schools is so imperative. And so I can't say enough about how much this is negatively impacting our students, our outcomes, and our achievement gap. And so we also took a look at the correlation between chronic absenteeism and a student's winter MAP scores, their reading and math scores, because I think this is extremely important for us to look at. This is grades 3 through 8. We looked at achievement and we looked at growth. And so chronic absenteeism, as we know, has been linked to lower test scores, course failures, lower graduation rates, reduced educational engagement, increased social disengagement, and spillover effects. So the job becomes spillover, meaning the job becomes harder for teachers the more absenteeism there has as students come back to a class, and they then have to tackle not only the class that day, but maybe students coming back into the classroom who have missed several days. As you see the graph in front of you, this is a graph for math scores from winter, NWEA winter 2021. And the dot are students who are not chronically absent, down to the arrow to those that are chronically absent. So as you can see, mathematics in grade 3, those that are chronically absent score 24 percentile on average lower than the student that is not chronically absent. Each and every dot and arrow refers to another grade, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th. You can see the average of all the grades is probably somewhere about 28th percentile points lower than those that are not chronically absent. And then if we look at reading, you see even a larger trend and a larger gap between those that are chronically absent and those that are not chronically absent. This sounds the alarms that if we want to change outcomes, we've got to get kids in school. And then this is growth. So you can see the growth, how much this is impacting growth each and every year. Same scales for students who are chronically absent versus not chronically absent. This is a huge correlation that we really have to take and take a look at this. And I believe make decisions based on this. And obviously I will say the alternative of staying with what we are doing, I believe not to be an option. And so our current state summary right now in JCPS this year, and we have to say, yes, this is a different year with COVID, that we have greater absences than before, but this is the reality of our current state. 26,831 students are chronically absent so far this year. That's a 7% increase from 18-19, the last time we had a full year to measure. And as I showed you, we have disparities by race, ethnicity, free and reduced lunch, special education, and health conditions. And then on top of that, chronic absenteeism in our winter 2021 MAP scores shows that if a student is chronically absent, they have lower achievement in math and reading and lower growth, which implies widening gaps. That's what we can predict out of this. Chronic absenteeism and the 7% increase will lead to widening gaps in student outcomes. And so I will conclude by saying this. Obviously, I'm talking a lot about the student assignment plan, because when we have inside of our choice zone 58% of our high school students and 52% of our middle school students being chronically absent, student assignment is a huge part of this. But let's be clear, it's not the only part. So what I focused on here were things that we can do as a school district. I still want to say there's a multitude of factors outside of this school district that impact student attendance. But I believe we need to provide a close to home choice for all choice zone students that fully resources those schools with the supports necessary to meet all of the needs that come with chronic absenteeism. We need to implement later start times for schools, especially in middle and high school. When we saw those numbers, those were alarming to me when I looked at these numbers. It even further solidifies the need to implement later start times. We need to continue to fund school nurses, even after the pandemic. The research shows that school nurses, and even further than that, school medical clinics improve student attendance. We need to increase the fidelity of district and school-based attendance teams. So I don't want to put everything out. We've got to do a better job with our district and school-based attendance team, finding the interventions that work and providing those interventions. We have to continue and increase fidelity of programs like the Academies of Louisville and our new Middle School Explore program that improves sense of belonging. The correlation is there with sense of belonging. Sense of belonging leads to increased attendance. And then finally, continue and increase focus on student physical and mental health. Because as we see from the data, physical and mental health are negatively impacting student attendance. And the more we can do to support those two things, the more we will have students in school, which will lead, as we saw, to better student outcomes. So unless we do many of these things, unless we change, we'll get the same outcomes that we've always had. And I have to say, we are putting our schools in an impossible situation when 58% of high school students and 52% of middle school students are chronically absent. It's time to change. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Polio, for your report this evening. Moving on our agenda, the persons requesting to talk to the board on action items or consent calendar items. I think those speakers are to be at the end of our meeting because we don't have everything we're looking at there are no action items tonight and no consent calendar items have been pulled down at this point. We do have at this time 3 speakers signed up to speak, but they will be after we take care of the other business parts of our meeting. I think I'm doing this correctly, double checking. So there are speakers in the room and Dr. Shule will take care of that when we get to that part on the agenda. There are no action items, so there will be no speakers now. There are no consent calendar items that have been pulled down, so we will move on with our agenda and then we will have our speakers before we adjourn for the evening. So moving on with our agenda, we have information items this evening. Our first information item is the school choice proposal, dual resides, feeder patterns, and choice zone support plan. At this time, I will turn it over to Dr. Polio, who will introduce this and his team members that may be presenting this evening. Dr. Polio.
Thank you, Chair Porter and board members. As we were just talking, we are going to talk about our JCPS school choice proposal. I do want to set it up by saying how we will be dividing this up. First of all, we want to give as much time as possible over the next 6 to 8 weeks for discussion. So first and foremost, this will be one of several times you will have to ask questions and discussion. I don't want you to believe this is the only time. How we will divide this up, at this meeting, we will be covering our boundaries, the change in boundaries and our support plan along with the dual resides. So all of those work together. We will be presenting that to you tonight. We would ask that your questions focus on those at this meeting. Obviously, you can send us any question when it comes to magnets. At our next meeting, we would like to dedicate to our magnet proposal and magnet changes. So at the next board meeting, you will have substantive amount of time to do that as well. Then in May, what we would like to do is see where this board is and have at least one, if not two more sessions where you have the opportunity to see any changes we've made along the way, final questions, comments, those type of things. So you will have at least 3 meetings to ask questions, give feedback, and possibly 4, depending on how we feel we want to go. So plenty of time for discussion. Today, I will be presenting most of the boundary changes, the dual resides, and the support plan. I have my team here that will be answering questions next at our next board meeting. Amanda Averett Bush will be doing most of the magnet changes, as that has been her baby for most of the time. I think at this point, at this team, we have almost come to the point where we could say this proposal and this presentation in our sleep, as we have done it many, many times over the past few weeks, which we'll continue to do and continue to get feedback along the way. We have a busy couple weeks ahead of us as we go out around the county, and I'll talk about that at the very end. So first and foremost, as you know, and you all have seen this before, so you know you're probably not seeing anything new. You've seen it probably a multitude of times, but I do think it is important that we cover it in a public board meeting and then begin to talk about it publicly and take questions. So as you can see, our school choice guiding principles that were done by our student assignment team that we put together 2 or 3 years ago were around equity, access, ease of understanding, diversity, and choice. This board approved those about 2 years ago prior to the pandemic, about 2.5 years ago, I believe, as those being the 5 principles, guiding principles. Right now, I do believe this, for every student in this district, we are 0 for 5 on those guiding principles. We do need to have substantive amount of discussion on this, because I do believe it's the most important decision that a board in this county has made in 40 years. And I will say this, we need to know at no time in the future, at any time, whoever is the superintendent, whoever are the 7 board members, we should never go 40 years without addressing student assignment. That doesn't mean it has to be massive changes, but it should be dug into on a regular basis, reported to the board outcomes, and decisions made on whether changes need to be made as well. And so we're committed to continuing co-creating this plan and making sure that we get feedback along the way, which we have done, and we continue to look at possible changes as we do that. So I think it's important that we level set a little bit. And I think my superintendent report hopefully teed this up pretty well. But right now, without a doubt, we have to know this is what the data shows. Black and brown students in JCPS are more likely to attend a Title I school. 70% free or reduced lunch or more. And these are not just students, these are students who are leaving their community. 3 out of every 4 students who leave our satellite area and go to a school outside are going to a Title I school. I want to repeat that. 3 out of every 4 are going to a Title I school. They're more likely to go to an under-enrolled school, meaning they don't have the same options. They're much more likely to attend a school further away from home due to student assignment. And I want to say this again, you will see we have 4 student assignment plans right now. We have an elementary, a middle, a high, and magnet that were all designed separately. This is probably the first time in at least 50 years that we have come to the board with 1 student assignment plan. And what the 3 different ones has caused, it has irreparably harmed our students in this district, as we have shipped students from West Louisville to the East End for middle school and all the way to the South End for high school and vice versa. And that has negatively impacted attendance and student outcomes. Our Black and brown students are more likely to attend a non-magnetic school. As I said, we have to know 86% of our students of color don't even apply to a magnet school. They take their assigned school, and they're more likely to have a lower sense of student belonging. I've told you this, I believe this, we can discuss and debate this. I want to say, I don't think this is the only thing with student outcomes, but it is a big factor in student outcomes. Students who have a strong sense of belonging, fewer behavior options, more open to feedback, take greater advantage of learning opportunities, build relationships, positive attitudes, more likely to persevere, more likely to graduate, and more likely to develop skills to succeed in professional and civic life. I think it's very similar to some of that list I just showed you about student attendance. Students who have higher attendance are more likely for all of these things to improve as well. And so I gave you this quote before. In sum, when students experience a strong sense of belonging in a learning environment, we see both immediate and long-term positive consequences for their academic performance and well-being. And make no mistake, I believe this, and I believe the attendance data shows it. Our current student assignment plan is negatively impacting student sense of belonging and student attendance. We have to believe that. We have to know that. I think the data is very clear around that. And so our current state around racial equity, our current system, our students who live what we are going to call our choice zone have no choice right now. They live in small disconnected zones and unfortunately have 90 feeder patterns. These lines cut right through the middle of blocks and neighborhoods so that a child living next door to another one or across the street may not go to the same school. That's negatively impacting our students. I told you our choice zone outcomes. I won't harp on this again, but we know the chronic absent data that I just showed you. We know the MAP data is lower, the proficiency rates are lower, and there is a lower sense of student belonging. And so in short, the best way to predict the future for us is to create it. We believe this is not the only part of student achievement and achievement gaps, but it is a significant part of both of those. So our future state vision, simply put, we want to foster a trustworthy system of resource magnets serving diverse student populations with transparency. And so this is essentially what we will be presenting next week. We don't want to change our magnets. We don't want to destroy our magnets. Our goal is not to do that. Our goal is to have magnetic programs, meaning a type of learning that draws students to the school. We want them to serve a diverse population that represents our student population, and we want parents to know why they got in or why they didn't get in a school. It's as simple as that when it comes to magnets, and it's all around those recommendations. You will hear that next week. We want to provide Black and brown students in our choice zone the option to attend thriving, diverse schools close to home with resourced, strong programs. And so I'll say that again. I believe the families have the opportunity to make that decision. If we don't give them a great option, they won't attend that option. And improve the experience for all students, for every board member, every single board member. This is going to positively impact students in your districts. So I want to say that we will talk a lot about choice zone, but this is a positive impact for all of our students. So what you will see today are 3 of these, which is first of all, boundary adjustments. You will see our feeder patterns, how it impacts predictability, and it optimizes right sizing for schools. Because we haven't done this in 40 years, and there's been population shifts in our community, we have schools that are at 50% capacity and those that are at 125% capacity. This work fixes that. And that's what we have to focus on. When we designed, I say we, I was 11 years old, but when this was designed, I take that from Dina, but when this was designed, there were not computers to be used to predict enrollment or future trends in population shifts. We have that now. And then we'll talk about dual resides, true choice for families in the choice zone, and alignment of the feeders. One of the best things this does, no longer, when this is passed, will we have a student who attends King Elementary, Kammerer Middle School, and Valley High School. And that's where they are required to attend. No longer will that happen. No longer, tomorrow morning, there will be a mother who wakes up and sends one child to Kammerer and one child to Valley. That will not happen anymore after we pass this plan. And then we will discuss the choice zone support plan. We continue to work on this and to improve this to bring you the best plan possible that supports the schools in our choice zone. And I believe this, we will support our choice zone schools with the plan we have better than any district in America. So first of all, our dual resides and feeder patterns. This proposal, I said students in the choice zone. So instead of having the satellite zone, we're now calling it the choice zone, will be guaranteed 2 options. In common language, just so we know, they will have a close to home option and a option away from home or further from home. And they have not had that option to this point. They'll have the opportunity, if the family wishes, to stay with peers for increased participation in athletics and activities. We have to improve attendance. Superintendent report, I mean, that That's a call to action for us, and sense of belonging, opportunities for increased family engagement and ease of understanding. And I can't say it enough. I'm going to keep going back to it. Our student assignment plan currently is negatively impacting student attendance. I know this, I've seen it firsthand. So here are our choice zones. As you can see, it is not chopped up as we talked about before. The current satellite areas are chopped up into many blocks. First of all, this entire area will encompasses the Academy of Shawnee's attendance boundaries and a brand new West Louisville Middle School, which we will have to put in the choice zone. No longer will the Academy at Shawnee have an attendance zone that extremely limits the students that can attend the school. But you can also see that it is complete alignment with Network 1, Network 2, and Network 3 based on the area of town. So those closest to the south corridor would be PRP, Doss Valley, Fairdale. Closest to southeast would be J-Town, Moore, Seneca. Closest to the east, Ballard, Eastern, Wagner, Atherton. And they align with a middle school at nearly 100%. You will see that as we move forward. You also see the elementary schools that are listed in each of the networks. So if a student lives in that network, as you will see in just a second, they have the option of all of those elementary schools if they would like to stay close to home. And you will also see the options they have further away from home. So just to level set a little bit, we do want to put some roads. So this does, and I want to be clear about this, this is not just about West Louisville. This extends beyond West Louisville all the way to Cave Hill Cemetery, to Eastern Parkway, and to Algonquin Parkway in Southwest Louisville. It includes Smoketown, it includes downtown, and it includes several other neighborhoods. But clearly we know this is the area that has been negatively impacted the most by a lack of choice since 1984. And that's why we think it is imperative to give families in these neighborhoods additional choice that they have not had before. And so this is how this choice will look. We will only show the Ballard resides tonight. At the end of this presentation and on our website is every high school map. So anybody in the community or here can go and see every single map that is available that aligns with the middle school and the high schools. I will remind you, elementary, middle, and high were all drawn separately. And so first of all, let's look at the Ballard High School reside zone, the area in East Louisville predominantly that surrounds Ballard High School. You can see the elementary schools that are in that area, which include Norton Commons, Norton, Zachary Taylor, Wilder, and Dunn. The middle school is Kammerer, the high school is Ballard. We do have a few on the far tip of that area that would attend Westport Middle School, but that's a very few number. Then in the Ballard High School choice zone, as I told you, the choices for elementary schools are Portland, Atkinson, Bick, and Breck Frank. The middle school option would be the new West Louisville Middle School. The high school would be the Academy at Shawnee. So as we will see here, we'll start with student A. Student A, as you can see, the star on the map, lives close to the Academy at Shawnee and close to Shawnee Park. So there's the pattern through JCPS for a student who lives in this house. At elementary school, their close to home option would be Portland, Atkinson, Breck Frank, or Bick. They would once again put down first, second choices like we do right now. Their away from home options would be Chancey, Dunn, Norton Commons, Norton Wilder, Zachary Taylor. So this house at the elementary school level would have 10 choices to choose from. At the middle school level, if they stay close to home, it would be the new West Louisville Middle School. If they decide to go the further away from home option, it would be Kammerer Middle School. If they stay close to home at high school, it's the Academy at Shawnee. If they go farther away from high school, it's Ballard. They are guaranteed in the choice zone, each of those. And I also want to note, this does not eliminate the ability to apply for magnets and transfers and networks. So for instance, that student A would have the choice to apply for a computer program at Eastern High School, for instance. So they would still have the option to apply to those, as would students that are in student B, as you will see. Student B, who lives outside of the Gene Snyder in far East Louisville, would have the same choices for elementary: Chancey, Dunn, Norton Commons, Norton, Wilder, Zachary Taylor. And they would also have the option of their away from home inside the choice zone, which would be Portland Elementary. So these families would have 7 elementary schools that they could choose from. Middle school would be Camerer, or the students may apply for magnets or transfers. And then also at the high school level, it would be Ballard, which you will see with our feeder patterns. 100% of these students would be on feeder patterns, because right now, if a student is in student A, once again, I'll say it, I know I'm a broken record, that student almost exactly where that star is, their middle school that they are assigned to is Camerer Middle School, and their high school is Valley High School. That is happening today. In this recommendation, it would be, as you can see, they would either have the close to home options, or at least 100% of them would get the Camerer to Ballard option. And as you can see, I just talked about student B. So we have a map for each and every zone across the district. The other benefit of this is, as you will be able to see, we are using major thoroughways for the lines as much as we possibly can, that boundaries come. So we won't have boundaries cutting through the middle of neighborhoods anymore. We will have major roads that are essentially the boundaries for neighborhoods. And I think that you will see much better sense of belonging, improvement, predictability, all of those things we talk about when it comes to this. So here is our current feeder pattern. I mean, this is what we look at. This is only 6 or 7 of our high schools. This is what our high schools, our middle schools deal with currently right now, which is at the top. The black bar is a high school. Then you can see the gray bars are all the middle schools that feed into that. You go right in the middle, Seneca has 7 different middle schools. That's not even choice. That is just students that are assigned to go there, and 14 different elementary schools from a number of clusters. All of these clustered are numbered 1 through 13. We are eliminating those numbered clusters because they don't mean anything to anyone. And so here is what our current student assignment plan looks like. These shaded areas are our elementary school boundaries. You know, right now there's a lot of discontiguous boundaries that are not connected and far apart from each other. But this is what it looks like. When we overlay the middle school lines, those are the middle school lines. An ideal student assignment plan, you would see no new lines. It would be exactly the same as the middle school. Or at least we would have high school lines that completely lay over the middle school lines. Here is our high school lines that lay over the middle school lines. This is what I mean when I say we have 3 separate student assignment plans. You can see every colored line you see or shaded area are lines that do not align with each other. Instead, here is our recommended plan to you. These are our elementary schools that align 100%. This is the exact high school boundary zone right now. But here is the elementary. We got it the middle, we got it as close as we possibly could. It's a little harder with middle to align perfectly, what we got close. And then if we lay over top of the high school lines, you can see the only ones that are different are there about 7 or 8 different yellow lines that make middle school a little bit different. Other than that, they're exactly the same. So we go from absolutely no unified student assignment plan to as close as I think we can possibly get with the elementary, middle, and high. And so as you can see here, this is what we go to. We go all the way from, our elementary clusters are aligned 100% with our high school. Most high schools have 1 to 2 middle school feeders at the most. And I can't say, how we are making it difficult on our schools to really support transition between 8th and 9th grade, to build programs together. It is nearly impossible for schools right now. As you can see, and I know you probably can't see this chart, but for those that are watching, I would really encourage you to go online, download this chart, and take a look at it. I'll tell you briefly what it says. Right now, kids that are going into J-Town High School, the columns at the top are our high schools. These are all of our resides high schools. When J-Town High School gets their 9th grade class next year, and I must get my glasses out so that I can see these, excuse me. So our kids at J-Town High School, the 9th grade class will consist of students from Carithers, Crosby, Highland, Mezquite, Ramsey, Shawnee, Western, and Westport, all over the entire county. We would have to ask, how would it possible be for J-Town to align with that many middle schools, and then also to make transition plans for all of those children and work with those middle schools. Let's look at Carithers. Carithers, right now, their 8th grade class. Here is where their kids are assigned. Reminder, Carithers is in Jefferson Town. Here is where their kids go to next year. Kids go to Doss, Fairdale, Fern Creek, Iroquois, J-Town, PRP, Seneca, and Valley. And we would have to ask, how would Carithers or their 8th grade counselors possibly work with all of those high schools to work on succession, promotion, programs together? And instead, what we are proposing is one that has 27 feeders. So let's look at J-Town is actually one who has more than almost anybody else. But instead of 8, now their kids come from Carithers, Ramsey, and our new Echo Trail Middle School. And let's look at Carithers. They go from 8 to 2 schools. The 8th grade class at Carithers, 100% go to Fern Creek or J-Town. And that means whether they live in the choice zone or out in the reside zone, our students now, there are feeder patterns that go from 90 to 27. And I will say this, throughout my entire career, I didn't think this could be done like most districts because we have a large district. Come to find out we can do this and we should be doing this. And so I won't read all of these, but you remember the long list that I showed you, the Seneca that went all the way down the page. This chart shows you Seneca now. Instead of 7 middle schools and 14 elementary schools, now Seneca has 2 middle schools and 6 elementary schools. A big difference. You can see all the way across of Network 2, and you can see the choice zone elementary options below as well. This is an example of the feeder patterns. You can see we use J-Town High School as an example. We wish we could get the middles perfect. So I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's a lot better than it was. Instead of having 8 and 12 elementary schools, now they have 3 middles and 5 elementary schools that feed into J-Town High School. This is Network 1. As you can see, I know from being the principal at Doss, the amount of students that fed into the middle school, I can go through them: Conway, Lassiter, the Olmsteds, Frost Stewarts. I could go down the line and talk about the number of middle schools, which really meant no work together whatsoever. Now 8th graders assigned to Doss will come from the Olmsteds and Frost Stewart. As you can see, 2 middle schools and 6 elementary schools. You can see each and every school across that there is no one with more than 2 middle schools. You can actually see there's a couple with 1 middle school that feeds in. This is Network 3 as well. As you can see, very similar when we talk about feeder patterns between middles and high schools. And so I do want to conclude this part and move in briefly to our support plan to remember our why, which is consistency, continuity, and choice. And I think even more importantly, our why right now is we've got to improve student outcomes. This is about student outcomes. Yes, it's about sense of belonging, but we are not going to be successful with the number of students that we have chronically absent unless we do something about that. And I believe we have to act immediately. Finally, I'll talk a little about our investment plan. And I think our investment plan, and going back to your support that you provided, is second to none once again. This was the resolution that was passed in September of 2020. As you remember, we had $15 million for 21st century facilities, at least $15 million for resourcing our highest need schools, which what we will be focusing on today, $12 million for racial equity initiatives. Some of those will come in to play as well in our highest need schools, and $12 million for additional instructional time, which will also impact our highest need schools. So actually all of these pots will positively impact our choice zone schools. And that's what we'll be talking about tonight, specifically those choice zone schools, because we want our families in our choice zone to struggle with the decision because they have 2 great options, and they will have these resources that we will be providing as options. And so first we pass the budget formula. This is extremely important. It didn't change a whole lot of budgets now, but if more students decide to go to a school in the choice zone, it's going to positively impact that budget right off the bat. We're going to talk also about staffing and resources, because we have to utilize this new funding formula for staffing at schools. We got to add more staff into schools, smaller class sizes. We are going to have the role of executive principal, which means the principals in our choice zone schools will be paid more, project manager, and we will be bringing to you a competitive compensation that, yes, we hope to attract teachers, but more importantly, retain teachers in our high need schools, because I know being in a priority school at that time, staff turnover was the most damaging part, having to replace 25 or 30% of your staff. If you only have to replace 6 or 7 teachers as opposed to 30, it is a difference maker for learning for students, the student environment. We're going to talk briefly about curriculum and pedagogy, where we support extended learning time for our students, having it built in for our students, curriculum that reflects their experiences, curriculum that supports increased reading and math scores, and deploying wraparound supports specifically for improved socio-emotional learning and for attendance. And you see the social emotional supports that we will be providing at these schools that I believe will be second to none compared to any other school around. And so, as I told you, our JCPS investment plan at the high school level will be an additional, and I want to stress additional, over what is given on their budget, $2.5 million a year. The academic supports will include extended learning, and all of these are detailed in our plan. Extended learning that we really want to make sure we offer teachers available for after school and summer learning. Career pathway expansion. Our best Academies of Louisville programs will need to be in the Academy at Shawnee. Our best Explore program will need to be in our new middle school. So if students want to take advantage of the opportunity to be in the flight program with the best flight equipment possible, sorry, I lost my words there, they would want to attend the Academy at Shawnee. College courses offered in dual credit ways, meaningful and relevant curriculum with a focus on reading and math. We want the school to be able to bring more counselors, more mental health practitioners, more athletic and extracurricular activities. Good news from KDE recently with the governor's budget and changes in KDE. We can now use bonding capacity to improve our athletic facilities. And I think we will want to start in our highest need areas. Teachers and administrative supports that I told you about before, more instructional staff, better PD, and you will know the increased pay for both teachers and administrators. And those multipliers will come to you before any vote that shows you. Our goal will be a multiplier on the current salary scale that we'll have to negotiate with JCTA, that we would like to increase pay in schools, but will also increase more as teachers stay longer. And then additional investments, small class size, as I said, the simulator, one-to-one technology that students can take home at every single school with internet connectivity and facilities renovation. $2.5 million at our middle school on top of what we would be through the budget. Very much of the same thing that I just told you. I won't go through all of these, but I do want to say meaningful and relevant curriculum, focus on reading and math, explore pathways that connect to the high school, counselors, mental health practitioners. You can see the supports with the additional teacher and administrative supports and the same additional investments around small class size, one-to-one technology and facility construction. And then, as you know, we have 11 elementary schools in our choice zone plan right now. So we would want these academic support. So across these 11 schools, an additional $7 million on top of what their budget allocates to them right now. Much of the same thing, smaller class sizes, enrichment activities, enhancing their magnets, same thing, relevant curriculum, reading and math focus, counselors, mental health practitioners, the increased pay, the additional staff, one-to-one technology and facilities renovations at our 11 schools as well. We will be asking and proposing to you to put these into policy. So we are working on policy that we will ask the policy committee to review. so that if this wants to be changed, we don't just change practice. Policy has to be changed for future superintendents or boards in order to take this away. And I know that's an important part of this as well. And so we're going to, on a formative evaluation process, have that project manager that's going to be working with a direct report to the superintendent to ensure that this is happening at each and every schools. We're meeting timelines, stakeholder groups. We are giving schools enough ability to use that funding wisely. So we are not mandating it, but we are also making sure the extra funding has the impact on student outcomes. And then we will be proposing to you a summative evaluation process. And so each and every year, we are going to, first of all, publicly report to you on the JCPS board on key implementation and metrics about how we're doing around student assignment, and especially how we're doing around bringing these funds to our school, how it's impacting outcomes. And each year we will put into policy that JCPS will contract with an external agency like our auditors, our financial auditors, who will conduct an outside evaluation of support. That support that we are providing to say that we are doing it will be provided to you, and it will be outward facing for the public to see. And this will provide that accountability in policy for you to know, can a future board change policy? Yes. But we also know what a future board or superintendent has to do in order to change policy, which is do it publicly at a publicly held meeting. And so moving forward on the work, just the timeline, and this is my last few things. As you know, we're getting to the middle of April right now. We have had multiple feedback sessions at this point. Many community, we're reaching out to as many partners as possible to make this presentation. You know, we'll be having multiple board meetings. Tomorrow night, we start our community feedback sessions. We are starting at Ballard High School at 6 p.m. tomorrow. I will say this, please watch for notifications. There is a possibility of extreme weather if we have to post between 5 p.m. and midnight tomorrow night. So kind of right in the heart of when we'll be presenting. So we will watch that tomorrow. If we need to postpone it because of extreme weather, we will. Thursday, we will be at Moore High School. Next Wednesday, we will be at Valley High School. And the following day on Thursday, we will have a virtual town hall so that everyone has the opportunity to be a part of this. We've had our board community forum at the Academy at Shawnee. We're continuing to look at potential revisions from the feedback we get. We're having this board work session and a multitude coming up. And then finally, hopefully a presentation for you for a vote with recommendations either at the end of May or early June. And I did want to say for the community, this is the way to provide feedback. We have a website, an online survey and feedback form that people can provide us feedback. We are taking that. We're listening. We're looking at ways that we may need to change. And we'll want to do that with you as well. Our virtual and in-person information sessions ongoing right now, and we've already had that community forum. So I do believe this is our future state. I said before, our current state is not going to change outcomes for kids. It is not going to happen. The alternative of staying with what we have, I believe not to be an option for us. This will increase choice for students in the choice zone. It will align our feeder patterns. And then you will hear at our next board meeting about the comprehensive magnet strategies that will align with MSA, Magnet Schools of America recommendations to us, and will increase the amount of Black and brown students in our magnet schools, which I think is an important part. So we believe the time is now to make these changes. I will just, without going through them, if you go past the questions and feedback, for anyone who wants to look at these, all of the maps are related there, as you can see. So I won't go through all of those, but for anyone who hasn't had the chance to study them, they can take that time and go to the end of the presentation or our full 307-page document, which is on our website at this time. So I will stop there, take a breath, and be happy to answer questions and look forward to your feedback. Thank you, Ms. Porter.
Thank you, Dr. Polio. There is a lot that we have received this evening, board members. So we are going to call on you for your questions and comments. The first timer will say 5 minutes, and then you can go into the second timer for 5 minutes. If you still have more, I would like to request that we come back to you after every board member has had an opportunity to speak. So 5 minutes plus an additional 5 minutes if you need it at this time. If not, you don't have to take the additional 5 minutes. But if you take that 5 minutes and you still have more to say, you will have an opportunity to do so after every board member has had an opportunity to speak. So starting tonight, I would like to start with Board Member Duncan. Then we will go to Board Member Marshall. Then we will go to Board Member Craig. After that, I will give the order as to how we will have speakers after that time. So at this time, I would like to call first on Board Member Duncan. Second will be Board Member Marshall. Third will be Board Member Craig. Ms. Duncan, please.
Well, I think you've handily really addressed some of the questions that I had, especially in regard to our choice zone schools and how they're going to be supported, because right now a lot of those parents have chosen those schools and they are close to home, but they're still low scoring. So, but I think you've addressed that with how we're going to use the resources in those choice zone schools. There's 11 schools that will get those extra resources to deal with achievement and how we're going to support that. So let me just go to this main question I have. A couple of years ago, not a couple of years ago, but a few years ago, we supported, we created 2 schools of color. Is there anything in our proposal for the schools of color that the board supported and was enthusiastically supportive of, and the community supported? Is there anything that we see in those plans that are not in our plans for our choice schools, so that we can gather that same kind of support that we had for schools of color moving to our choice zone schools?
Well, I would say this, that first and foremost, we have to acknowledge that any magnet school, anytime a parent applies for a school, it is essentially indicating a social capital of ability to navigate the system, which always, research shows, can lead to higher outcomes. Very proud of the supports that we gave to both W.E.B. Du Bois and Grace James Academy. It's been on the facility side a struggle. Neither one of them have still gotten the facilities they need, but we are in the process of correcting that. As far as supports inside the building, I believe that these would exceed that it will exceed, and you will see budgetary, they will exceed these by a long shot. I think we will need to increase the amount of wraparound, so to speak, services that we provide at our choice zone schools. But in the end, I think the answer to your question is no, we will exceed the supports that we give.
Okay, I think that's a huge question for us, because we saw in those plans enough to give enthusiastic support to them. And I just want to have that same kind of enthusiasm for these plans here. Only question I had about when we see our space in our high schools and we see all of the options that will draw kids into these high school buildings, like we'll take Ballard, for instance. You see the area that Ballard covers, and it's also covering the choice zone option area. Have we figured numbers in such a way that we feel comfortable that we're going to be able to accommodate the numbers in these clusters, these new zones, or whatever we're calling them, things now that we have that are by the high school boundaries? Do we feel comfortable that those buildings will be able to accommodate that?
I do. I feel very comfortable. I'll say this again. Boundaries were changed to right size our buildings. I'll use Moore as an example. The boundaries of Moore Middle and High School were changed because they are significantly overcrowded right now, significantly overcrowded. And so right sizing the school by looking at the population, Our consultants, which are much smarter about this than any of us, have the technological ability to, circle a specific area and see exactly how many children live in that area that will attend a public school. All the algorithms that then go into that are well beyond my knowledge and ability, show that, we are actually going to improve the right sizing of our buildings so that we don't have schools. And as you know very well, right now in our South End specifically, we have Western High School that's probably somewhere in the 60%, 50 to 60% capacity. Doss High School that maybe is 60 to 70. We have Valley High School that is under enrolled, but they were all built at a time when the population was much greater in that specific area of town, and it has shifted since that time. And so this is going to give us the opportunity to actually right size and do the things that should have been done 20 years ago. So the answer is yes, I do believe that.
All right, thank you. I will think of something else later. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Duncan. Moving on to Board Member Marshall, please.
Thank you, Chair Porter. I just have a few questions to get started. I'm so excited about this. I think, as you said, Dr. Pola, it's a long time coming for some big changes like this. I think this is something that will have a great impact on our sense of belonging and our families in a huge way. One of the first questions that I've got from some parents, that there may be some that are moved into, say, a new network for their elementary school, and they may not be familiar with these elementary schools in this new network. So how are we going to go about easing parents' minds? Because people talk and sometimes misinformation gets out about certain schools. So how are we going to ease parents' concerns when they're in a new network with schools that they may not be familiar with, or the information they've heard about those schools is incorrect?
Well, I'll start by saying this, and I would encourage any family, as I did as a principal, when I stood at Showcase of Schools and a parent said, I heard that's a bad school. And I said, have you seen our school? Have you been inside? No, haven't you? That's just what I hear. First and foremost, I would encourage parents to give that school and that the leadership team and the teachers an opportunity. And I always said, come to school, you choose the time. I'll meet you and walk you around. And at the end of that time, if you tell me this isn't the school for you, I'll shake your hand and say, good luck, and we'll work on that. But there were very few times when I was able to do that, that a parent then said that on the way out. I did it myself with my daughter. I had heard that Hawthorne was not a good school at the time. And yet we went and toured it and were blown away. So first and foremost, I would say give every school an opportunity and don't just go by the good school versus bad school narrative. Secondly, I would say this, the easiest for this board to do with everything would be to say on August 15th, whatever the first day of school is, 2023, everyone goes to a new school wherever it's assigned, whether you have to switch schools or not. That happened in 1976. I don't think this board wants to do that. We want to allow students to stay in their current schools. That's what we call grandfathering in many ways, but we're not really using that term. But that's what it's been traditionally called. But we want students to be able to stay in their schools in order to make sure that we don't harm students in this process. But at some point, we do have to say it's starting for students who are not enrolled in that school. We will do what we can to accommodate families that have siblings through the transfer process, but we cannot guarantee that everyone will be in that school. That's happened before, and instead of a 5, 6, 7 year process to implement it, it becomes 10, 12, or 14 years because someone might have their child might be in the 2nd grade and they have a newborn and they want that child to go through the same school, and we wouldn't be able to accommodate that. So we will do everything we can to accommodate families and they will stay in the school they're in. Siblings that are coming along will be a challenge. We'll do everything we can to meet their needs. But at some point, we do have to implement, which would be for our proposal, 23-24 would be the first year for kindergarten, 6th grade, and 9th grade for the new schools.
Okay. And a quick question about the $7 million figure that we're looking at for additional supports for those 11 elementary schools. Can you talk a little bit about how we arrived at that number, or is that an estimated figure out there right now, something that can be adjusted as we see additional needs?
It can be adjusted. We tried to look at what the student enrollment would be. So high school and middle school would be much bigger than the smaller elementary schools, but that can be adjusted. You all have done in your resolution that 15 million. We wanted the additional 3 million to be set aside for AIS schools that are outside of the choice zone so that we can continue to support our AIS schools as well. But once again, that is all dependent upon your all's decision. I would also encourage us in policy to consider putting any new revenue when we approve a 4%, that a certain percent of that maybe once again goes to our choice zone and our high need schools, so that, you know, $15 million 10 years from now is less than $15 million now. I'll say that louder so that they hear it in Frankfurt. 15 million is less 10 years from now than it will be right now. And so we do need to put into policy ways to say, you know, a certain percentage of additional revenue that is approved by this board would be dedicated to resourcing our high poverty schools.
Okay. And we also talk about smaller class sizes, which has amazing outcomes when it's done correctly. But we can't mistake the fact that, you know, we're dealing with a teacher shortage right now. And I think we know to grant these additional supports, we're going to need more adults in these buildings. So I don't need an answer now, but I just want to put it on this board's radar and yours as well. As other board members have brought up, that now is going to be the time for us to start strategizing on what it's going to look like. As you said, for us to retain teachers, to make sure that we have competitive pay going forward, and also on the facility side as well. It's nice to have smaller class sizes, but not a lot of our buildings have the classroom capacity to add 5 or 6 more rooms. So not necessarily a question needs an answer, just something I want to keep on our minds. And then finally, when we talk a little bit about our plan to align our programs, now that we have cut down those feeder patterns significantly, we now have schools that are better aligned to provide support. So what's our plan going forward for aligning those programs? I'll give an example. Dawes High School has amazing academies. And it's aligned with Olmsted, which I know is a STEAM academy as well. So what's our process for making sure that those principals and staff get aligned in their program offerings?
So I'll say this board has done an incredible job of funding high schools, especially the academies at Louisville, and building incredible programs, including facilities, when it comes to CTE and pathways. And it has been truly incredible. And the outcomes, unfortunately, right now, especially around post-secondary readiness, have been really on hold as we've gone through this COVID. But we'll see this year, even during COVID, I believe we'll be 75% of our graduating seniors will be transition or post-secondary ready, which is an enormous number for us. And that's a true indicator of success, I believe. A student leaving high school with something additional, you know, whether that be the ACT scores, whether that be a credential, you know, a certification, dual credit, all of those indicate future success for students. And that's happened because of the academies of Louisville. What we have not funded well is middle schools. I'll be quite honest with you. Middle schools have been underfunded for decades here in JCPS. And so I look forward to presenting to you. We've talked about it some, our new Explore initiative, which essentially that's what that does. We don't want them to be career pathways. Essentially they're more interest pathways that would align with the school. So if you went out to Ramsey Middle School, for instance, that feeds now completely into Fern Creek or J-Town, their Explore pathways would not necessarily be just welding, but it may be a manufacturing type skill, a robotics type skill, so that the J-Town teachers and kids could come work with the Ramsey kids. And then at Fern Creek, It could be around one of their academies of Louisville, the communication program, to be aligned with Ramsey. And then so each of our middle schools that are in the Explore, their Explore initiatives would align with the high schools that they feed into. We couldn't do that now because we can't do 8 or 9 different high schools. Now we will be able to do that. And I think you will see incredible results out of middle school as a result.
All right, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Marshall. Next, we will have Board Member Craig, Board Member McIntosh, and then after that, Dr. Chris and Dr. Shule. Board Member Craig.
I think that after the hours and hours of time that we've spent on this already, the meetings that we've had, I don't have any new questions to ask tonight, but I appreciate the presentation and I'm excited about where we're going. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member McIntosh.
I expected my colleague to be longer winded, so my apologies. I really don't have a lot of questions. I just have a few comments, things that I want to make sure that we're, you know, keeping on the to-do list. Going all the way back to the superintendent's report when we were discussing chronic absenteeism, and we talked and you talked about physical and mental health. I want to make sure that we're including hygiene as part of our physical health. We know that there are a lot of studies that indicate when students don't have access to water because it's been shut off at home, they stay home because they're embarrassed because they can't shower before going to school. There's not a lot of research done on the impact of menstruation in our young ladies and their school attendance, but early indications are starting to show that a lot of our young ladies miss 1 day a month or more because of that biological fact. And so most of that research has been done outside of the United States because it's not a comfortable subject and it's not something that people talk about a lot of times in public, even though it affects 50% of the population. So I want to make sure that these kinds of hygiene issues, when we're talking about physical health, that we're also taking those kind of things into account and making them part of the conversation.
And I will say, I think the impact of having a school nurse at the site it positively impacts those things as well.
Yes.
So, you know, that whether it's a counselor or a nurse, there is a safe space to have those discussions too.
I agree. When we start talking about providing additional instruction around math and literacy, that's great. I support it. I want to be careful that our schools and our school leadership don't fall back into some of those, I'm going to call them harmful patterns from 10, 15 years ago with kill and drill. I'm going to pull you out of art. I'm going to pull you out of music to do all of these additional, I'm just going to call them poorly guided extra instructional minutes. I want to make sure that we're protecting the arts programs and the electives and the things that we know a lot of our kids show up to school for. And so that we're creative in the ways that we teach literacy, for example, through science and through social studies in meaningful ways. I know that you know what I'm trying to say, but we saw that I think probably 15 years ago, a lot of our students across Jefferson County were losing some of those joyful parts of going to school in an attempt to bump up test scores in a couple, especially some schools. And I want to make sure we don't fall back into those negative patterns because we are so focused on test scores that we forget what makes learning and education joyful and desirable and attractive to our students. And
if I could comment briefly on that, I agree 100%. I was a part of that movement. It was a wave that went through here that we still see vestiges of at times that did negatively impact students. Stopped coming to school. So it was about not coming to school. So there is a lot of things going on right now around curriculum and who gets to decide what the curriculum is. I mean, you know, I will say this, I do believe, especially in areas like this, that the superintendent should be deciding the curriculum so that we're not necessarily doubling up on math and reading, but we are ensuring that a great research-based curriculum around math and reading is being implemented at each of the schools, and it's being supported from the district. So it's very difficult to support math and reading curriculums, say at the elementary school, if there's 10 or 12 different curriculums out there and tools being used. But if we can say in our choice zone schools that this reading curriculum, this math curriculum, and we are going to train the heck out of it with the teachers and provide an immense amount of support that it's implemented well. And then we provide opportunities for additional learning outside of the classroom to supplement that instead of taking them out of those things. That will be the focus.
And I appreciate that. And I know that you and I are pretty along the same lines, but sometimes I do feel as board members, we need to say things publicly so that our staff and our parents and stakeholders hear us and know that we're having those conversations and expressing those concerns. I've mentioned to you before, and board member Marshall had already commented about keeping families together as we make these transitions. I think that that is of real significance, especially when we start looking at students' participation in extracurricular activities and things like that, and just the additional burden that it can place on families to keep their kids involved when the kids are attending multiple schools. And then finally, kind of going back into some of the other chronic absenteeism, and as we sort of rethink what our schools are going to look like in terms of I'm sorry, moving from one school into
pathway.
Thank you. As we start to think about that, there are some things that I think we need to maybe also have a lot of those vertical conversations around. For example, you know, we've got some schools that are still in really strict dress codes, some schools are not. Uniforms in some, and just having those conversations around, you know, if all these kids are coming from, you know, some of the elementary schools have very strict dress codes, some of them don't. What's that going to look like when they move to middle school? Those kind of things I think are important to consider. And I know for a lot of folks, they're shaking their heads like, why is she talking about dress code? That's a huge burden for families that are not well resourced, because then they kind of have to buy 2 wardrobes as opposed to just one that you can wear your school clothes and, you know, everywhere else that you go. Rules around you can't have a hole in your pants. Well, if a kid falls off their skateboard when they get home from school and now they've got a hole in their pants, what do you do to replace them if you can't? And so those little things that I think that aren't high level, I just want to make sure that as we have the conversation for implementing these programs, or implementing these changes rather, that we're bringing together our school leaders to have those conversations to help make these changes and transitions easier for families and not as burdensome. And that we're thinking about all the little things that the moms are thinking about when we're sitting here having these conversations. So
yeah, I agree with that. I think I do not think, though, we will see a change. Well, I know there is no change if Senate Bill 1 becomes law, that there will be any change around SBDMs other than curriculum and principal hire. And so we can have those conversations with principals and leadership teams. They will remain an SBDM choice is the challenging part of it. So
that's all I have for tonight, though.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to Dr. Chris and then Dr. Shaw. Dr. Chris.
Thank you, Chair Porter. You know, there's just a few things based upon feedback from constituents and reflecting a little bit more in general. I'm strongly in favor of the draft proposal. As you say, you know, there may well be tweaks made as we continue to get feedback. I wonder if we could put up the chart with the different percentages of middle schools going to high schools. Again, whoever has control of that. Yeah, sure. So one of the things that the single issue that I've probably heard about the most being in District 2 is the Atherton boundary changing. And I totally understand why it's changing the way it is. If you look at the high school boundaries for Seneca, Wagner, Atherton, you know, the way that they are proposed in the new draft is more, you know, the regions are more compact. I think it's probably worth exploring. I hate to ask you to do yet another community forum, but it's probably worth looking at possibly doing one at Atherton to talk to families directly about it. And see if there's any kind of specific things that people have noticed that maybe we haven't considered yet.
And if I could just address that real quick, we have been notified by that often in our feedback. Looking at the maps, I'll say this again. What we've tried to do, and let's see if we can go to the Atherton map. So Atherton is one of the few that the school, as I said, we look for major roads to be the boundary line. The major road, obviously, in that community is Bardstown Road, which reflects that pink line. It is there's only one other school where the high school comes that close to the boundary line, and that is Valley, but it's been that way. So that's not a new change. But as you go across Bardstown Road, we know there are a significant number of houses that actually families walk across the street to Atherton. So it is a walkable distance and a walkable thing for families across there. So we have our consultant right now working on some potential changes to that. Once again, we don't want to go through the middle of neighborhoods, and we've got to make sure we right size it. But we do understand too, when you are having a family that can walk across the street, that makes sense that the family would want to go to that school. So we are looking at that right now, pretty in depth.
Good, thank you very much for doing that. And like we don't have to get into all the maps right now, but if you look at Seneca's current map, for instance, versus the Seneca proposed map, it makes much more sense in the new proposed map. And part of that is because of what's happening to Atherton, so there's going to be give and take, everywhere. And I hope we can, and I think we will be able to find a solution that doesn't necessarily satisfy everyone 100%, but works,
And I'll say this, we are very open to that discussion. This is why we put it out and we're doing the feedback. We have to say at some point we have to draw a line.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's always going to be a line, and there's going to be a house on the other side of a line.
Yeah.
I would encourage families, once again, as I said before, take advantage of going to look at the school that they may not think is the good school, but do that. But we are looking at that.
Well, and that's another, great point that you raise, is that, unfortunately, a lot of people have perceptions about, good and bad schools. Courier Journal did a whole podcast and, story series about it as an important dynamic in Louisville. And, part of that's going to change. Perceptions probably aren't going to change as fast as the reality, unfortunately. But what people consider to be good or bad or in the middle or whatever is going to be significantly different. And hopefully everywhere gets a little bit better overall. That can we find that chart real quick? The question, which one I'm talking about, with the red square, red, yellow, green squares.
Yeah.
With all the little numbers, you had to put your glasses on to see.
Yeah. That's the one we're looking for.
Yeah.
No, the two, 90 to 27.
90 to 27. There it is. Yeah.
There. Up. There you go.
The one Marty had to put his glasses on. So Dina, you can probably tell us this. What the red? What's the threshold for the red? Okay, so it is under 10. So, you were saying earlier, one of the things that's not ideal is that we weren't able to match up middle and high completely perfectly. It's pretty darn good, pretty darn close. Have we looked at? Do we know what the effects would be if we did match it up perfectly? Like, in other words, why isn't it perfect?
Feel free, Amanda, to jump in on that if you all.
Our consultant probably could give a better answer than,
than
I do, but it really basically comes down to where the locations of the buildings are and just distribution of students at each level. But we are, in particular, part of the feedback that we're looking at are to, and possible make changes, is to take those two red feeders and make them.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only thing, that I'd like to look into a little bit more, relative to my district, is that 5% from Highland that goes to Wagner. Like that's a really low percent.
Right.
being split off. So I just like to look at if we could.
Yes, we're looking at that one as well as the Olmsted to Doss.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. And oh, the last question I have is, and apologies if I missed this in one of the emails we got, but is the feedback that people are giving online, and then is that being collated somewhere where we can kind of look at it from a high level, hopefully?
Yes, we'll bring back at one of the future board meetings. We're still collecting that. We had about 400 responses so far, but we'll keep the feedback form open throughout April until the forums are done, and then we'll bring back themes.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Dr. Chris. Next, Dr. Short.
All right, thank you so very much for this work and for giving me something to do over spring break. So I read that document, still digesting it. I want to revisit Ms. Duncan's point about what made the difference in Grace James and Du Bois.
Okay.
And possibly what would the potential be of allowing, and I think what makes the difference between Grace James and Du Bois is curriculum and their ability to choose their teachers. What is the potential of allowing the Title I schools within the choice zone that same freedom to choose their teachers and to develop curriculum that is specific to their population of students?
So I 100% agree with you, and I think that's what we have in the plan. Now, the choice of teachers we'll be negotiating with JCTA. That'll be a part of the negotiations. Our desire is to take away as much limitation on choice zones as absolutely possible. You know, there are still going to have to be some guidelines, just like there are at Grace James and WEB Du Bois right now. Okay. But having guidelines specifically for those choice zone, and then without a doubt, I mean, you know, when we say the curriculum, so I mean, there is no doubt that it is going to be, you know, a significant of minority students in our choice zones based on our housing patterns. So we want the curriculum to reflect their realities. We want it to be Afrocentric. We're not going to, just like we want that at WEB Du Bois and at Grace James. And then, like I said before, that math and reading curriculum, we want it aligned so that we can really support it. But I think we can do much of the same thing.
But it has to be negotiated with JCTA.
The same as we did with Du Bois and Grace James. Okay. We did that same process.
Are there any efforts to make sure that schools within the choice zone will be diverse?
Well, I mean, that is going to be, you know, I think our push on diversity is going to be around, you know, at the elementary level, our schools in our reside zone will have a choice to go to our choice zone schools. We are, you know, the big impact is going to be on diversifying our magnets. That will be a big factor.
So we're focusing on diversifying magnets, not schools within the choice zone.
That's correct.
Okay. As it relates to belonging, we talk a lot about belonging. I'm curious, once we get past belonging, what are the specifics concerning teaching and learning? Because I'm concerned that there is a possibility to feel a sense of belonging in a school, but that does not always translate academically. So how are we ensuring, and what are the specifics, and will we receive a presentation around those specifics academically?
Yes, you will. We'll have that as a part of one of the presentations about the specifics. Now, a lot of that is going to be, you know, so many of them right now are CSI schools, which means the district can pick the curriculum. I don't want to say that they're all SBDM schools, but the fate of whether that will be aligned or not, that the district will be choosing reading and math curriculum for them and other science and social studies, and supporting it is the most important thing, so that we provide the training, we provide the accountability and oversight, we provide the resources that are necessary. So we'll be providing a presentation on the specific academic part of it that we would like to see in the choice zone schools.
Right.
But I think what we will see is a much better aligned system that supports and provides resources to schools in need.
I'm really interested in seeing that and hearing that report when it comes before the board. As we talk about belonging, how will we monitor the sense of belonging for students who live in the choice zone but choose to attend school outside of the choice zone that are non-magnets?
So, and I apologize for not answering the first part of your question the first time about sense of belonging. I do think the most important thing, first of all, is we get students in desks and inside the school building. I can't say that enough. I mean, we've got no shot if they're not in the school building.
Right.
So getting them in there, yes, a sense of belonging is important. It is not just the only thing that matters. I don't want to be mistaken that teaching and learning and curriculum doesn't matter, but you know, a foundation for that is a student feeling a sense of belonging. What we do in our comprehensive school survey every year is we have a sense of belonging construct so that we can bring you data that says, here is the sense of belonging.
So there are metrics for it.
There are metrics for it, and we can bring you specifics that say students that stay in their, we can extrapolate it out for choice zone and for students who choose to go outside of the choice zone to the reside zone, and we can show you how those are impacted as well.
That was my next question. All right, I have some other things, but we'll talk about it later.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Schwab. I have a few things to say that may not get answered this evening, but thank you, first of all, Dr. Polio, and for everyone that is working to have the conversations with the parents and the community about the plan and getting feedback as we move forward. As we talk about Title I schools, Dr. Polio, I think the board has received a list of Title I schools and where they are located. I wonder, have we provided that information to the public? Because it sounds like the Title I schools maybe are in specific areas of the district, but I think based on the criteria to be a Title I school, that they are not necessarily located in one specific area of the district. So are we providing information to parents and the community about where Title I schools are located?
Dina, how many Title I schools do we have? Just, I think it's 70% of our schools are Title I.
Yeah, close to that. We have, I think you have to have 70% of your kids on free and reduced lunch to be.
I mean, I do think it's a very high number. So I do want to first of all say they are all over the district. Title I schools in every part of the district and have grown year after year. So that's an important part of it. But I think we'd be happy to make sure, I don't know if we have that listed on our website yet or if it's on there, but I think that's a real easy thing for us to show as well. So I'm happy to do that.
I think it's important because we talk about as students move from one school to another school, that they're moving from one Title I school to another Title I school. And it's important to understand, I have seen the growth in Title I schools historically with JCPS, but I'm not sure that the community and our parents are clear on how it has grown and how many schools we have. I think that is important information that we should share with them. And somewhere with the graphs and everything that we have with the plan, maybe they should be able to see that to get a clear understanding of what we're talking about. The next question can be answered later, but the question that I've been asked and that I have is, as we send students, will the academic, as we move students around, will the academic opportunities be the same? And I want to go back to a story that you shared, Dr. Polio, about back in the days of 1975, where a student in West Louisville attended Whitney Young Elementary School and was in the advanced program at Whitney Young Elementary School. When she left Whitney Young Elementary School, in order to be in the advanced program, she had to go to Stewart Middle School. So my question is, are we no longer going to have that a part of our students having choice in that they have to move from West Louisville to Southwest Louisville to get the academic program that they have started in the elementary schools? Are these programs going to be more prevalent all over the district as opposed at some schools? That is a question that I have gotten from many. So you can give us a yes or no, and then we can get more details later. I don't need a total explanation, but it's a question that's being asked in the community.
I'll just briefly say that the answer to that is yes. Our goal is to make sure that our choice zone schools have opportunities that every other student in every other school in the district, even if that means the expense is more, per student, we are ready to do that and support in that way. So the answer to that, I believe, to be yes.
Okay, the next question that I'm getting, as we have schools that are oversubscribed, as we change magnet programs and just programs, period. Currently in the district, we have some families that have applied to schools 4 times and never gotten in. So the question is, for the schools that are oversubscribed, what becomes choice when a parent, family, students try to get into schools and they are consistently not put into the schools? And I understand the lottery process. I know how that works, but what does that do and what does that say to parents that are committed to getting their students in programs? How will that be handled over time?
Well, I think first and foremost, it says that we have to replicate the magnets that are popular. And so, the example in your district, Ms. Porter, clearly is Lincoln Elementary, that has 400 applicants for the kindergarten class every year and may only take 90 to 100 kids. So we know that 300 are being turned down. So first and foremost, it's the replication of those magnets that we want to be a part of this. And yes, it doesn't mean that's an immediate fix where you can just say every family gets in, but the long-term approach is that it is a popular magnet that is drawing families, and we want to replicate that so that we give families the opportunity to get in. Then I think the important part of all magnets, which we have not done, is at least the family knows why they didn't get in. I think all too often we have families that don't know why all they did is they get a no, and they don't have any understanding of why, especially when it comes to criteria-based schools. And so being very transparent that the lottery is happening at the district level so that families can trust that it's not based on school decisions, and that we're very transparent about any criteria that has to occur and support those. I think that was a Dr. Schul point that we had earlier when we were talking about things like performing arts. If kids need supports that may not have those outside of the walls of the school, we need to make sure that we provide opportunities for those. So all of those will be a part of the magnet presentation at our next meeting.
Okay, thank you. And that leads to the question, as we continue to talk about replicating magnet programs, our magnet schools, where will they be located? Are they located to become a magnet, or we're just going to put them in various parts of the district? Whereas some people will stay close to home, but we have replicated a magnet program. What is the intent about replicating a program? Will it be a magnet, or will it be replicating a program or a school at the convenience sometimes of families? What is the conversation about that, please?
So our goal, as you will hear, will be that magnets are full school magnets. I mean, that's what we want. That's what we're striving for. Namely, because when you have a magnet that also has reside students coming in or a part of their cluster, that means a student may be taking part in a magnet such as performing arts that may have no interest in that. I'll say it, I've said it multiple times. If when I was in school, I was made to go to a performing arts school, I would have been miserable. My sister would have been happy as could be. I would have been miserable, but and so that is when we do full school magnets, we want them to be families that are saying this is the type of learning we want, and it's wall to wall across the school, not just in a few classrooms in the school. Our goal will continue to be that we put our magnets in the urban core, hopefully more in choice zone areas that will draw students from all over the county. That is our goal when we talk about diversity of magnets. So we will want to continue that process. We do think the district got that right of, having magnets in the urban core to serve all families. They just haven't served all families since that time. So that's what we will be looking to do.
Thank you. And you mentioned earlier, and I was trying to take notes, but you said that annually the board will receive accountability reports. What accountability will the board receive every year as we move forward with the student assignment plan? Because we've talked about an external auditor coming in, and we have talked about the report coming from within the district. So what will the board hear annually about the accountability of the plan as we move forward?
So what we would like to do, once again, is put this in policy. I want to say that again, through our policy committee. And so letting our policy committee weigh in on exactly what indicators and things that would like to be seen in that report, and bring that policy to you all so that it cannot be just a practice that is changed. And so when we do that, our goal really at this point has been, and this can change depending upon the policy committee, is that the outside auditors will be looking at whether we are providing the resources that we say we're going to provide to the schools in our choice zone. So when we say this is we want more counselors, we want $12 million, we want the best of our Academies of Louisville programs, we want the outside auditor to be able to come to you and say that is happening or it's not happening. And then our part of that is to provide you data based upon things like who is choosing schools. Are we meeting diversity targets in our magnets? So it would be a report that we would give to the board like we do in other areas that really identifies those indicators that we're talking about for success all across the student assignment plan.
Thank you. And will the outside auditor speak to the academic progress within the district? Because that is something that I don't think that we have had on an annual basis, except from within the district. We continue to look at schools that are our AIS schools. So what kind of report will we get outside about the academics within those programs? Because we have consistently worked to make them better, and that some are better, but we're asking students and families to, as a choice, to move from one school that's an AIS school to another school that's an AIS school. And that has created conversation for me with people in the district that I represent. And I have heard that same conversation come out in the community forums. So the academic accountability is a part of public education. So will that be a part of the report that we receive, not only from within inside the district, but from the outside also?
Yes, ma'am. We can put that in the policy so that that report includes those indicators and results.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, I think that Dr. Dossett spoke to this, but since she spoke to it, I would like for you to say again how we are looking at the attendance at the forums and online. We have a lot of community members that are coming to hear the presentations, some of which have lived through student assignment from 75 on. But my question is always, how are we communicating to our parents within the district that they understand what the choices are and that they understand how they can make the choices for their students? And I know Miss Amanda has spent an enormous amount of time talking to parents. That's more than a one-person job. But my question is, as we talk about what people don't sign up for, our parents and our households, how are we keeping up currently with the multiple forums that are being held, the multiple church meetings that are being held, the multiple meetings that are being held about public forum? How are we keeping track of the parents that will be impacted by this student assignment, student choice plan? And I think Dr. Dossett spoke to that, but if you would repeat that, please, I would appreciate it.
Well, I think what we're going to do is provide at one of our sessions coming up, we want to give more time for families and parents to give that input and then provide to you all an overview of what we heard from a variety of stakeholders, but without a doubt, we want to also let you know what we heard from parents. I think like Dr. Kalb talked about with, that is a big parent one we've heard about, is the Atherton boundary line. So we will bring you that data and themes that we heard, whether that be from community members or from parents. You will have that information.
Okay, thank you very much. That completes any questions or comments that I have about this. So thank you Dr. Polio, for you and your team for making this presentation this evening to us. And so that takes care of our information item for this evening. At this time, is there a motion to receive this report on the student choice proposal? A motion by Dr. Schul, seconded by Board Member McIntosh. And I want to underline and put in all capital letters that we're receiving a report tonight. I don't want people to misunderstand that we're voting on the plan. This is one of the many reports that you're going to bring to the board. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, would you please raise your hand? Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Polio. Thank you to all the people that are working on this that we may or may not be seeing on the screen tonight, but this is a lot of work for everyone. So thank you for the work that you continue to do as we move forward with making this information available to our community, our parents, our staff, and our students. So next we're going to move to the consent calendar. I have not been asked to pull down any items. So at this time, is there a motion to approve the consent calendar this evening? Is there a motion? Board Member Craig, seconded by Board Member Duncan. All those in favor, would you please raise your hand? Thank you very much. It's unanimous. Next, we will move to the planning calendar. Is there a motion to approve the planning calendar this evening? Is there a motion? Board Member McIntosh, seconded by Board Member Marshall. All those in favor, please raise your hand. That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Are there any committee reports for this meeting from board members? Any reports that you would like to share? Board Member Craig?
Just repeating what I've already emailed to the board members, our facilities committee will meet on April the 21st at 6 o'clock here in the Stewart Auditorium. There'll be a Zoom option if you're not able to participate in person. Mr. Perkins and I have been working for a while to develop an agenda for that meeting. Mr. Marshall's comment about moving classrooms here and there and everywhere in order to put Band-Aids on our facilities needs is directly relevant to a part of the presentation that Mr. Perkins has created for the meeting. Hope everyone can participate. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other committee reports this evening? Okay, thank you very much. Moving on now to board reports. Are there other board reports this evening? Any board reports? Board Member Duncan? You're on mute, Ms. Duncan.
I'd like to ask a question on Mr. Craig's date for his April 21st. Is that the same date as the virtual forum?
Oops. Chris? Well, I'll talk to Marty and Chris about that tomorrow and come back to you guys. That was not on our radar when we came up with this.
Okay.
What was the time?
Alrighty, thank you.
Oh, okay.
What time's the virtual forum?
Oh,
great. Okay. We're trying. All right, we're trying to get this moving.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question and thank you for your response, Board Member Craig. Ms. Duncan, do you have anything else?
Yes, I just wanted to say, taking part in Build-A-Bed on Saturday, Ben Langley coordinates that massive event to produce beds for students that have been turned in to youth services centers all over the system. And it is such a fun event. And I know probably some of the others will be on that too, but I just want to mention it, April 16th.
Okay, thank you. It's a wonderful event for anyone that has not participated. It's a lot of great people coming together to do greater things for our community and our students. So thank you, Ms. Duncan, for mentioning that to us tonight. Any other board members that have board reports? Dr. Schul.
I would just like to take a moment to recognize Justice League. They were here earlier, being recognized for their work in Frankfurt. But just this past month, they had a play that was featured at Actors Theater for an entire weekend, and it was an incredible show that received rave reviews. They were even asked to come back for an additional set of shows. And so I was very proud of our JCPS students participating in Justice League, representing the district in that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shore. Anyone else? I have a few comments, reports, comments. This is not, I'll start off with something that is not necessarily a report, but I think it needs to be recorded as part of the work of public education and history. History was made this week in Washington, D.C., when we selected an African-American woman that will be a part of the Supreme Court. And from this woman, we learned a lot. We learned grace and perseverance and commitment to education to get where she is. And I just want our students to know this. We have students in law and government classes. We have students in history classes, and we have students that face a lot every day coming to school. This is a history-making moment for all of us, but it also is an opportunity for students to look at people that have come forward when folks have not necessarily told them that they would get there. And the hearings were interesting. So what we have seen is a woman that is strong in character and in doing her business and in speaking what she has been trained to do. So I just would like that to be recorded as part of JCPS and public education. It's not I'm not asking for a resolution, but to not respond to that, I think is not fair for history in the United States and all over our country. So that's how I wanted to start tonight. I also wanted to, I think I have not said this yet, but to thank the YMCA for the continued program of the Black Achievers Scholarship Program that they have had this year. And this is a program that has been going on a long time, that started small within JCPS and other school districts, but it's a huge program now. And I noticed this week on Facebook that some of the female students from the Achievers program are currently visiting Spelman College, which has to do with our young ladies in the HBCU. So I want to thank the Y, Steve Carver, and others for the work that they continue to do with that. Also, I don't think I've said this, but I have to thank Daryl DMC from the rapper. I don't know if I mentioned this before, but he was in town to present for Leadership Louisville, and they contacted our district, and he came to King Elementary School and talked to the 3rd grade students because he's written a book called Daryl's Dream. And this is the book. I got my own to read. So this is what it looks like. Why is this important? He talked to 3rd graders. This book was written about his life as a 3rd grader. So I want to acknowledge that no cost to JCPS, but just with the support of Leadership Louisville, he came to one of our schools. He did not read the book. He talked to the students about his life and their life. So I want to publicly thank him and Leadership Louisville for making that opportunity available to JCPS. And the last thing I want to end with is we continue to have condolences within our district for our staff, our students, and our families. And I think that we would be remiss in saying that we are not through the pandemic yet. And there are many things that are causing us to lose staff, family, and in some cases, students. So I want to offer condolences to everyone. It breaks my heart to say that I have lost one of my students from Male High School from back in the days. But the good news is I have communicated with her and her family since Male High School. So we have produced great leaders in Jefferson County. So thank you for what we have done. And I want to express my condolences to families who are losing people. And I say that because Board Member McIntosh has talked to us about, we don't know what students come to school with on their mind. And we have to keep that as a part of what we are dealing with every day and how we deal with it in approaching education for our students, our staff, and our families. So again, thank you That's all that I have to say under board reports, and I promise to try to not be this long again. So now we are going to move on to the persons that are here to address the board. Before I read the statement, Dr. Shore, will you confirm that we still have speakers for this evening before I get started? And
yes, ma'am, we do.
okay, thank you. I'm going to quickly go through this statement, and Dr. Shore is in the Stewart Auditorium. He will call the speakers up, and we will hear from our speakers this evening. Thank you, speakers, for being here. And part of the process is that you speak to us and share your thoughts. This is not a question and answer period for the board and the superintendent, but thank you for being here to share your thoughts this evening. In accordance with board policy 01.421, the board expects that persons who have signed up to address the board will limit their remarks to the subject that they listed at the time they signed up, that their presentation will not include any abusive remarks about the subject, and that they will present their remarks in a manner that is consistent with the orderly conduct of the meeting. Also, in accordance with board policy, the board reserves the right to limit, extend, or terminate discussion on any subject. Discussion of personnel matters is not permitted as the board has no legal authority regarding such matters, and such discussion is not appropriate. Personnel matters are within the authority of the superintendent. If a speaker begins to discuss a personnel matter, the chair, vice chair shall immediately terminate the speaker's remarks. A speaker may not initiate charges or complaints against an individual district employee. Discussion of a district employee by name or position is not permitted in order to ensure confidentiality and fairness for the employee. If a person discusses a district employee by name or position in their remarks to the board, the chair, vice chair shall immediately terminate the speaker's remarks. Speakers before the entire board are not allowed to use props, displays, or other objects during the presentations. However, informational handouts may be given to the assistant secretary to the board for distribution prior to or following the meeting. Each speaker is allowed 3 minutes to address the board and may not share these 3 minutes with any other speaker. At the end of 2.5 minutes, a bell will sound once. You will then have 30 seconds to finish your statement. At the end of 3 minutes, the bell will sound twice, indicating that your time is up. The superintendent will look into the speaker's issues and, if necessary, represent the board in following up on recommend action to the board. Board policy 01.45 establishes that for business meetings, a maximum of 45 minutes shall be allocated immediately after the superintendent's report for speakers on action items or consent calendar items to be voted upon separately at board member request. A maximum of 45 additional minutes shall be allocated at the end of the meeting for speakers, first for speakers unable to be accommodated during the first speaker section, and then for speakers on non-agenda topics. Current district students shall be placed at the front of each list of speakers, the action consent list and the non-agenda item list, respectively. The full board policy concerning public participation in open meetings is available for viewing on our website and at our sign-in sheet. So at this time, I would like to turn the meeting over to Dr. Shore. Dr. Shore.
Hey, Adelman, speaking to us about teacher pay raises. Now she comes, everybody knows she's a pretty avid supporter of public education, but I think it's only appropriate to extend condolences to you, Ms. Adelman, in the loss of your father.
Thank you. Chair Porter, your words choked me up. I'm sorry if I'm a little slow. I only have 3 minutes. So my name is Gay Adelman. I come to you tonight first as a parent and a taxpayer. My son, as you know, graduated from the Academy at Shawnee, and I really do appreciate hearing Academy at Shawnee mentioned so frequently in your presentations. That is a marked shift from previous leadership, and I greatly acknowledge that and appreciate that. Some of the things that I heard as a parent at Shawnee, my son, by the way, graduated from Shawnee and went to the U.S. Naval Academy, and he is now a Marine pilot. So the magnet works. We live in East Louisville, and it drew us to a school that was high poverty, high minority, and the magnet works. So first, I want to say a little bit about student assignments because it's just so on everybody's minds. The things that I heard from parents who lived in that neighborhood and whose children attended that school or couldn't even get into that school. One is, and I've mentioned this to my board member, James Craig, a few times, but it was before the pandemic and we kind of lost some momentum. Dual resides should be dual resides for everyone. And what I mean by that is us out in Eastern or those who live in Ballard should also have a West Louisville school as their choice. That is one way to plant a seed and try to gain some of that diversity and flow back into the West Louisville schools. So that's one suggestion that we've been hearing. Two is what I call ban the box. And that is, even before you implement your student assignment plan, please remove the application barrier for families that don't have a choice, who don't have the opportunity to attend school close to home, so that they can at least apply. The application for transfers that was really probably intended for students like my son, if he doesn't want to attend Eastern, he has to have a good grade point average and good behavior and good attendance before he can apply to transfer to a different school. That makes sense, but it shouldn't apply to our students in West Louisville who don't have those other options and who often have behavior or attendance issues because of the distance to their school and the lack of supports that they have to get their children to school if they miss the bus, etc. Thirdly, I would recommend that we don't lose sight of diversity targets for our traditional schools, because was that a 1 minute warning? I don't see the timer. Pardon? Oh dear. And I still want to talk about teacher raises. So we have to make sure, let me shift to teacher raises for the last 30 seconds then, because we have to make sure that we point the finger upstream at who's responsible for the decisions that are coming out of Frankfurt that are taking teacher pay and teacher raises out of the budget and giving their legislators a raise instead. People at the end, if you have 45 minutes at the beginning, can you go ahead and have non-agenda items? It's a barrier for people.
Thank you. Rob Mathel? He left. Okay. Sarah Bertrand? She left. Okay. Turn it back over to you, Chair Porter. Chair Porter, you're muted.
Once again, a lady talking to herself. Sorry. So thank you to our speaker for this evening. Thank you to the board and for all the presentations. There are no additional, there's not an additional executive session. There are no additional action items that we need to deal with this evening. So at this time, the time being 8:25, I would ask for a motion to adjourn our meeting for tonight. Is there a motion to adjourn for this evening? Board Member Duncan, seconded by Dr. Chris. Will everyone, we'll take the vote, but I also want to wish everybody a happy Easter for those that are celebrating that this weekend. So my faith and I will be celebrating the Easter. So now we have a motion and a second, and I'm a little bit off script, but I want to mention that. All those in favor of adjourning, please raise your hand. And thank you so much for your service. We are officially adjourned. Thank you very much.